Remind me, everyone, to complain to Beverly about that song. I feel like I'm watching an 80s public access television program. Anyway, welcome to Unsafe Space. Today is, I don't know, Monday, March 28th. God, it's almost the end of March. I'm Carter. You're watching a show we call Narrative Dissonance, in which we try and get people from outside the mainstream to have conversations about what we should be paying attention to, what we're being lied about to. And yeah, today might be a little bit different than normal. We were going to have a roundtable discussion, but as Keith mentioned, who I'll bring on in a second, it might be an end table discussion because we're missing someone that was supposed to be here, but they might show up late. Anyway, normally you can watch us at unsafespace.com. All of our content's there. We usually we have the embedded live stream there as well. Although I also was just told that the live stream's not working, so we'll fix that afterwards. So you should be on YouTube, Utreon, Rumble, Odyssey. Those are the places to find us. Welcome. If it's your first time here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can also follow us on Twitter at _unsafespace and on Getter at unsafespace. The best way to support questioning the mainstream narrative is just to share this content or any content on Unsafe Space with a friend of yours. And you can also go to unsafespace.com for financial support. It does cost money to do this. So, oh, wait, one more thing. Book club. We do have a book club coming up on April 24th. It's the abridged version of the Gulag Archipelago. For those of you who have been in book club for a while, you know we changed the format last time. So each book now has an advocate. The advocate for this book is Thomas St. Thomas. He's the one who really wanted to read this, so you can blame him for the long book assignment and join him on April 24th to talk about the book. All right, so let's without further ado, let's introduce the panelist who is here, the other half of the end table, I guess. Keith Bessette. Keith is a writer, a fact checker, reason advocate, critic of overreaching government, an electrical and systems engineer, and a punk videographer. You can find his work on Uncover DC, the Liberty Solutions podcast, and soon he will be hosting a new series here on Unsafe Space called Rebel Civics. Keith, welcome.
Hello. And I agree with you about the music. I felt like I was about to get a tooth filled at the dentist.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. Sometimes Beverly's great, and other times, she knows what it's like to deal with producers that are pain, so that's okay. Well, Keith, as you know, we normally start with a couple questions and kick off a discussion. One of them is, what's the most important story about which the mainstream media has misled people in the past week? I know there's a particular thing that you can't help talking about it, and so I think you should talk about that because if our other panelist shows up, she probably won't want to talk about that as much. So you and I can talk about that.
So we should get that out of the way. So
let's get it out of the way. Yeah.
So the way I was thinking of starting this is I just want to point out what the media has been saying about Crimea and the Donbass republics, Luhansk and Donetsk. Apologies to the people for not pronouncing them correctly. They're not part of Ukraine. Like, I object to this whole thing. They're not part of Ukraine. What are they talking about? 8 years ago, all three of them seceded. They had citizens' referendums. They went independent. They're not part of Ukraine. Russia didn't annex Crimea. Crimea left Ukraine, became independent, petitioned to join Russia, and Russia accepted them. So this whole idea that Ukraine is like one nation and one country, like if you go back, I went down the rabbit hole going through Ukrainian history. You go back to 800 when Russia started in Kiev, and these lines have been moved around all over the place. So like, that's not one country. The western half is a lot of Polish people that used to be part of Poland. The middle, maybe, is that what you call Ukraine? I don't know what to call Ukraine. The eastern half, they all speak Russian. They're Russian people even. And they were part of Russia for 50, 75 years. Anyway, that's kind of my opening thing that they're lying about. They talk about the annexation of Crimea. Like they seceded from Ukraine. No shots were fired. Entirely peaceful. The only aggression that's happened in the Donbass, in Luhansk and Donetsk, is by the Ukrainian government, who's been shelling them for 8 years. I don't know what the real numbers are. CNN says 14,000 people have been killed and like 1.5 million people displaced from their homes. That's Ukrainian government killing people in those two provinces. So
let's get into Crimea
just
for a second. So like we've talked about this before, but let's start with one and then do the other. I guess first of all, I just want to step back and first of all acknowledge there's a melting pot. There's a mix of different ethnicities and people who have been in that region for generations, and people getting kicked out for one reason or another, or fighting for one reason or another, or being invaded. Like that's how the history of much of Europe goes. So there's definitely people that can argue, well, you know, my great grandfather had this land, and like, well, my great 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 grandfather had this land. Well, my great 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 like, okay, like that's true. That does happen. But Crimea in particular, I believe was part of Russia in like 1780 something, somewhere around there. It was officially part of Russia. So it then became part of the Soviet Union. And it was it's Russia's only all year deep sea port, so it's extremely important from a military perspective for them. And when when it became part of Ukraine, when it was quote given to Ukraine, it was in a weird time. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and I forget who it was. I don't think it was Khrushchev, but it might have been. I forget who it was. Someone, I don't think it was. Someone they said, oh, fine. Crimea can be part of Ukraine, but it doesn't matter. You all report to the Kremlin. You're all part of the Soviet Union, so who the hell cares? So it was, quote, given to Ukraine. And then, look, when the Soviet Union fell, I think a real question could have been asked, like, well, like, who gets what, right? I mean, you and I are both more liberty-minded, so kind of, as far as I'm concerned, if one family in a house wanted to secede, that's their right. They could do that, but whatever. The agreement was Crimea could stay part of Ukraine, but Russia got to keep the deep sea port in what's it, Sevastopol or whatever. That's the California city. I never know how to pronounce it, but that's the deep sea port. And that, that was fine. That's what Russia wanted. Russia had a base there. They had troops there. They kept it there, and it was part of Ukraine, and everyone was happy. Then after the 2014 revolution, which, if you want to get into that, we can at some point, the U.S. government and Western powers clearly played a role in, because they didn't like who was in charge. One of the first things that the new leadership did was say, well, maybe we will kick the Russians out of the naval base. They didn't do it. They didn't like actually try and make a move, but they talked about it, and that was enough for Russia to say, well, you're not doing that. And to say that there was no force, there was a little bit. I think that soldiers left the naval base and stood outside and was like, go home. This is ours now. And the people did vote. Again, the legitimacy of that election, I don't know, but that's a separate issue, is whether the West can be lecturing people on legitimacy of elections. So, like, there was an election. They voted to be part of Russia, and the soldiers went back inside the base, and that was the end. There was no death. There was no shooting people. And you can argue whether the election was legitimate, but that's an argument that doesn't require shelling people and going to war. That's an argument you can make, that you can talk about and maybe say, hey, we demand that you have another election and we monitor it or whatever. Like you can have those kind of conversations, but that's not how it's been portrayed at all, right? It's been portrayed as this Russia walked in and annexed Crimea against the will of the Crimean people, and that's just not true.
No, and you still see this word annex being thrown around. That's not what annex means. The troops are there anyway. It's a huge base. Like the town where that base is, like most of the people there, they're involved in the military. And I think the West, even though there's a lot of moaning and groaning about it in Ukrainian government and US and other European powers, I think they recognize that if they tried to push on that one, it would be a problem. Like it was going to start a war.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of people were like, don't start a war with Russia. That's not a good idea. and if you prevent them from putting ships to sea in the winter, they're going to push back pretty hard on that. The Russia was leasing the base from Ukraine. There was a good, at least some relationship there.
Yeah.
When the Soviet Union split up, they just agreed to lease the base, and everything was fine. And people were going back and forth over that border all the time.
Yep. And then I think shortly after the Crimea incident, I think, was it Odessa, that the Ukrainian government was worried that Odessa was going to do something similar, and there was a show of pro-Russian support in Odessa, and I think the Ukrainian government came in and like just burned it and killed people, and like I'm not sure how closely they linked themselves to it, but like it was just we got to get rid of the pro-Russian sentiment in Odessa because they were worried about Odessa doing the same thing. So the idea that there's this unity throughout Ukraine of like, yeah, we're all against, we're all very, very pro the current Ukrainian government and against everything else. Like that's probably true for many people in many places, but not all the places.
There's a huge, all these people wouldn't be trying to leave, and they claim it's a democracy. They've been, building up this Zelensky as this pro democracy. Right. Like one of the first things he did is ban men from leaving the country. Like that's not a democracy.
Right.
And then he like made the I think you talked about last time. If you didn't, I heard it somewhere else, but like he's making the opposition party illegal. He made all the media agents part of the state. Like,
yeah, there's not free press.
Like that's not a democracy. We're not protecting a free democracy there. And we could get into later the fact that the whole thing was set up helped by the CIA in 214 with the coup. Go back into that later. But my point was that it's the people, and mentioned you before, like the people are not the government. So I hate when people say Russia did this, Russia did that. It's not the Russia, it's the Kremlin. You can talk about Putin and the Kremlin and the Russian government, the Russian military. Like, okay, they did stuff. As far as I can tell, a lot of people from the Russian military don't even really on board. Like they're leaving in droves, right? Ukraine is offering cash and citizenship to anybody who wants to leave, and some people are taking them up on it. Russian soldiers is like, what did we just get ourselves into? And they were probably told we're saving Donbass. And so anyway, that's kind of overall lie. The point about leaving that I haven't seen anyone in the mainstream media, and I don't watch a lot of it, but I will watch clips of Tucker Carlson or something. Somebody puts it on Twitter. I don't hear anybody really talking much about that they seceded. And the whole concept that are people allowed to form their own government. I've been making a point and getting jumped on Twitter and all, but when you argue with me on this question, I like to just point out, like, you're not just arguing with me, like you're arguing with Thomas Jefferson. Like, do you disagree with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison? And me, I've always got this thing around, right? My little Constitution. So I was just going to read one line, if you don't mind. This is from the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. That's what Crimea and Luhansk and Donetsk have done. So if you think that Ukraine has the power to, shell them and try to keep them as part of Ukraine, you're disagreeing with Thomas Jefferson in 1776. Like you're saying that you would have been on the side of the king at Lexington and Concord. You would have said, yep, send people out to Lexington and confiscate the arms. We can't let these people get away with this. I side with the king. That's what that position is. So
I can't tell if there's, all right, let's play devil's advocate. I can't tell if maybe one of the reasons people push back on that is they say, well, no, because the king wasn't a democracy, and democracy is what makes it legitimate. Now, this gets into one of my pet peeves for 20-something years, which is this conflation of democracy with liberty, like this idea that democracy is somehow a moral form of government, as such. And democracy is no different than dictatorship. If it's just a democracy, if that's all it is, it's a democracy is a means to an end. And so in a dictatorship, you have one person who can do whatever he wants, or she, I guess. One person who can do whatever he wants, and that's he's got absolute power over you. In a democracy, 51% of the people have absolute power over the other 49%. And it's worse than that because the people who know how to manipulate crowds have power over everyone else because the crowd becomes a tool. So what made America special, and the reason it was worth defending and protecting, was not that we were going to vote, but that the government, the system of government, was at least intended to preserve individual rights, and individual rights were the moral foundation. And we weren't supposed to be, you're not supposed to be able to vote away, for example, the right to free speech or the Second Amendment. Like, you're not supposed to be able to vote those away. It's not it's not an unfettered democracy. It's a constitutional government with rules that say, you dumb masses can't vote away freedom of speech. I don't care what you vote for. You can't do it. That's the idea behind it. And it's liberty. It's the freedom and the recognition of individual sovereignty that gives the U.S. that gave, past tense, the U.S. any moral high ground. So to run around and be like, well, Ukraine's a democracy. I'm like, I don't give a crap. Who cares? Are they a constitutional republic with rights enshrined that they're actually trying to preserve? Or do they just have some voting booths? There's a huge difference between those two things, and we just don't care anymore. If we ever care.
Democracy as an ideal, like, it'd be fun to talk about whether the voting is legitimate at all, but that's a separate subject. We're kind of taking their argument that voting is supposed to be their ideal. Like, that's how you run things, by majority vote. Right. Another word for that is mob rule. It's the same thing. 51% control the 49%. That's what they mean by democracy. And the word democracy there's nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Like, the word democracy isn't in there anywhere. The whole setup is like to make sure it's not a democracy. They were adamantly against kings, which includes mob rule. The original setup is the people majority vote for representatives in the House of Representatives. That's it. Presidents aren't picked that way. Senators. Anyway, so it's taken their argument that what we're trying to protect is democracy. Well, first off, a democracy is not something to protect. That's a bad system. Then secondly, Ukraine is not a democracy. It's not even close. You could get back into, you mentioned the coup in 2014 when Victoria Nuland and John Kerry are in Kiev and they're picking a new president in the overthrow.
I think it wasn't John Kerry she was on the phone with. It was Peter, guy whose name I forget. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The guy on the phone. Yeah, that's a different person. It's I think I have his name somewhere in here in notes. I know who you mean. That guy. The phone conversation. John Kerry was there though.
John Kerry was the Secretary of State or something at the time. Is that right?
Secretary of State. John Kerry was Secretary of State. He's in Kiev during the.
Jeffrey Pratt is the guy she was having the phone call.
Jeffrey
with.
Pratt. Jeffrey.
Pyatt,
it's spelled.
Yeah.
Pyatt. Pyatt. Right. So, yeah. Jeffrey Pyatt. He was U.S. ambassador. Right.
I have Secretary of State, but hey, whatever. Who knows?
Yeah. John Kerry was Secretary of State.
That's what I mean. Oh yeah, Jeffrey Pyatt was ambassador. Yeah, I'm sorry.
He was the ambassador, I guess, to Ukraine, right? I'm not sure.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, he's heavily involved there. Yeah, he was there. Victoria Nuland was there, right? You see the picture of Victoria Nuland handing out donuts to people going into the legislature building. Like, what's that? What's up with that? John Kerry made a whole bunch of trips there in the days leading up to it. The U.S. was heavily involved. So you're protecting this thing that they call a democracy, which is a government that was overthrown. The president escaped. Snipers were shooting at his motorcade as the essentially Nazis were going into the Parliament building, and he got away because they kind of faked it. They faked the motorcade, and he escaped by helicopter, and they sent out a fake motorcade in case they blew up his car. He went to Crimea, where everybody speaks Russian, and then he's in exile in Russia now. So, yeah, I don't call it a democracy. So you can't say we're protecting a democracy. That's not the
that
idea.
And that whole 2014 thing is kind of. I don't think people. I mean, I'll be the first to say I don't know what happened, but the fact is that it is pretty messy history. It's not super clean cut. It's not like, oh, this is clear, and then this bad guy came in and did this thing, right? In 2004, it was Yushchenko and was it Yanukovych? I guess were those the two in 2004?
I have trouble remembering names I can't pronounce. But yeah, that sounds. Yeah, I recognize those names.
Yeah, it was the Orange Revolution.
Yushchenko. They call him Yak, right? Victoria Nuland uses the name.
No, that's Yatsenyuk that she's talking about. Yeah, that's okay. Someone else.
I'm sorry.
Like that's I said,
I shouldn't have spoken.
No, but I think so. Yushchenko is the guy who the U.S. wanted in 2004, and Yanukovych is the guy who Putin wanted. Right? He won in 2004, but NATO and the West did not like it. They claimed it was they didn't like the election, and they kind of came in. Now, remember, Viktor Yushchenko, who they wanted, his wife actually worked for the State Department in the past. So, like, he had ties to the West. Like, there was a very clear tie to the West. And Yanukovych, I don't know if he had clear ties to Russia, but he was supported by Putin, or, Putin, he was at least Russian leaning, or not anti-Russian.
He grew up in Crimea. He's
partially
Russian heritage.
They came in and kind of strong-armed them into having another election in which Yanukovych lost. And then you get Yushchenko in power, and that kind of doesn't go the way that they want. And eventually Yanukovych, there's another election years later, and Yanukovych gets, I think in 2010, he was left alone by the West this time, but in 2010 he got reelected. And now when people talk about the Nazis, it's weird to say Nazis in Ukraine because people think of like the German anti-Jew Nazi, very specific Nazi thing. And like maybe some of them are specific Nazis. They're definitely nationalist, and there is a lot of anti-Semitism. But let's talk about Stefan Bandera, however you pronounce it. Like, he was an actual Nazi from the older guard who I believe the CIA actually helped hide in Europe after the war and support. So like he had CIA support. And a lot of these newer organizations have explicitly paid tributes to him, explicitly view him as a leader. Trizub, Right Sector, Svoboda, like a lot of the National Socialist Party, like a lot of these are all in Ukraine that like idolized Stefan Bandera. And the president that was prior to Yanukovych had made Stefan Bandera a national hero. He had like given him an award. And the quote pro-Russian dude, the Viktor Yanukovych, when he got elected in 2010, one of the first things he did was repeal the honor from this Nazi dude. So the idea that like there's just clear cut and dry, like here are the good guys and here are the bad guys, and the bad guys did this and it's like so not true. Look, and when Yanukovych won in 2010, that's when eventually it led to the 2014 uprising, and that's when you get like that phone call with Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt and like picking the government, and her saying, well, Yatsenyuk should do this and this person should do that and blah, blah, blah. And like laying out what they wanted for the government. And lo and behold, oh, voila. There's a bunch of clearly the radical right wing who was doing the protesting in Maidan. They clearly were willing to be violent, and we still to this day don't know who some of the snipers are or who was shooting whom or what happened, but there was clearly an escalation, an intentional escalation. Things fell apart. The guy flees on his helicopter by this,
secret
decoy thing, right? Yeah, he had to flee, and at the end of the day, the U.S. gets what it wants. It gets the lineup that Victoria Nuland wanted. That's what they get. And there's examples of people talking about this kind of openly. If you remember, who was it that went on some late night talk show? I forget who it was, but some U.S. rep went on to a late night talk show and talked explicitly about, hey, we're hoping that Putin's going to be focused on the Olympics and we can get away with some crap here. So this new government comes in and they start to talk about getting away with crap. And of course, Putin, for all of his faults, isn't a moron. And he was like, well, don't talk about taking Crimea. That's when the quote annexation happened. He was like, no, you're not. Don't even have that conversation. You know what? It's ours. The end. They voted for it. Done. But all of this is something that I think a lot of people we see past documentaries, tweets, speeches, all about how messy and problematic things are in Ukraine. And suddenly it's all swept under the rug because it runs counter to the narrative that we're being asked to swallow. Sorry, that was
the
a
narrative to start a war. Well, since I'm the only journalist, I think you have to be the other journalist.
I can be the other journalist.
so we can still call it a roundtable.
I'm still going with the end table. I like that description better.
End table. Yeah, this is an end table. Media end table. Yeah, and I wrote down a couple quotes from Kerry, who was, that Jeffrey Pyatt was involved. But if you want to just think, like, go back to 214, like the U.S. was messing with Ukraine. You can go back to World War II and earlier, right? They're already messing around with that. Germany was in there. I think Turkey for a while. Who knows who was? You have to go back to like the year 800, and you'd get a headache if you go down that rabbit hole. I spent a whole afternoon doing that, and I was like, wow, I don't even know what Ukraine means. What is? It's not one people. That's why I kind of started with that.
And by the way, what's wrong with letting regions say we're independent now? And like, okay, fine. What's wrong with letting that happen? Why do we have to support? No, you have to answer to Kiev.
Yeah, and they never really have. They've always been kind of separate. They mostly speak Russian. And it's hard to figure out what the votes are. I mean, the reported numbers are like in the 90% of the people who bothered to vote. And a very high number of people voted. Now, who knows if that's real? It's like looking at voting results at Moscow. But clearly there's a lot of sentiment there. And when Russia moved in 4 different waves, 2 of them were through Donetsk and Luhansk. And there wasn't that much resistance there. Like they pretty much, okay. A lot of people were like, well, yeah, okay, you can come through here.
Well, they asked to be part of Russia previously, and the Kremlin said no.
Kremlin said no. And maybe Putin was, I don't know what Putin's motives are. Maybe he's trying not to stop a war. I've listened to some of Putin's speeches, translated versions, and like, just kind of sounds nationalist. I'm not defending him, but it's not hard to figure out what he wants and why he's doing this. I think my view is that if he just stopped in Donbass, if he just went into Donbass and went up to the end and stopped the Ukrainian government from killing people there, I think we should have said, well, okay, he stopped the war. He could have done that, but he didn't. He had to go further. So I don't know if he's like posturing or he's, playing a card game. Who knows?
Well, he's been pretty clear about the NATO
chess
thing.
Like Trump. He's been clear all along. And Zelensky in, 6 months or whenever it was ago, he's at some conference in like Austria and he says, yes, of course we want to be part of NATO. And the movement of NATO, like they should have dissolved NATO when the Cold War ended. Like that's the peace dividend. Where's this peace dividend? But they need an excuse to spend $1 billion a year, U.S. government and the military industrial complex, whatever you want to call that. They're still spending $1 billion a year. They're spending more now than they were when Cold War ended. So they have to start new wars. if they can't find a war, they'll stir one up. So it seems to me that's what they're doing here.
Can I
That's what
pull
has
up a
been
tweet that let me find this tweet. This is so great. It speaks to what you're saying. This is October 9th, 2020, so a year and a half ago. This is from John Brennan. So if you don't know who John Brennan is, he's the CIA director. He says, imagine prospects for world peace, prosperity, and security if Joe Biden were president of the United States and Alexei Navalny, the president of Russia, he's Putin's enemy, will soon be halfway there. And then he quotes some.
Then he quotes
John
a communist song.
Yeah. Then he quotes
promotion of communism. Does this mean that John Brennan wants the whole world to be run by a communist government, or does he want the whole world to be run by NATO? I think it's one of those two.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's much of a difference, but I look at these and I say, well, look, I mean, he's explicitly saying we don't want Putin, and soon we're going to be halfway to getting rid of Putin. Which I think he means the halfway is Biden being president, because this is right before the election. So he two things he says: Joe Biden president and Alexei Navalny president of Russia. So he's saying, oh, soon we'll have Joe as president. We're halfway there, but there's clearly an agenda here, and it's funny because Biden the other day added on at the end of his speech. I don't think it was part of his written speech. I think it was something he added extemporaneously. But well,
I'm skeptical. If it makes sense.
It's hard to tell. He might not know either because it's Biden, right? But he made a remark that like Putin's got to go, or Putin can't stay there. I forget exactly what, but I'm paraphrasing. Like Putin can't stay, which caused a lot of controversy, obviously, because this is on the heels of. So we had Lindsey Graham call for Putin's assassination. We had Jen Psaki say somewhat humorously, it's not the policy of the United States for regime change and assassination of leaders is not something that the United States does, which is just hilarious. And then Biden is like, Putin's got to go. It's like, all right, well,
that sounds like a slip. Like he's getting a little senile and he accidentally said the truth, because I'm sure that Biden has been in conversations for decades talking about that. So he's heard about how Putin's got to go for certainly since before he was vice president. Like when he was senator, they were talking about it. They probably were talking about it. I don't know how far back that goes. I mean, I went down that path just looking like how far back is Biden involved in this. So when he tweets like Biden is halfway there, like I think he's right. Biden is halfway there because Biden has been working on this for a long time.
Yeah,
since at least the Obama administration. If you just look at the money, like Biden just said they're going to send $1 billion to Ukraine. I'm rounding off. Like they're going to send $1 billion worth of stuff and money and assistance. The last time Biden sent $1 billion to Ukraine, it was to get a prosecutor removed. Now, CNN says, I read the CNN fact check on that. It said, no, he didn't leverage $1 billion to stop his son from being prosecuted. He leveraged $1 billion. CNN reported he did leverage $1 billion, but he wanted to get a prosecutor fired. So I guess it was a coincidence that it
was unrelated to the fact
overseeing someone who was investigating his son. That's a funny coincidence.
Totally. Yeah,
for like a very well-paying job in a company, an energy company, a business he knows absolutely nothing about.
But just to be clear, very well paying
he doesn't speak.
Yeah, very well paying. We're talking, was it like $80K a month or $60K a month? It was some ridiculous amount a month
there
to sit on the board of directors and get his dad to have a meeting with people.
Maybe his dad would have a meeting. Yeah. And he knows nothing about the energy business. And he doesn't speak Ukrainian. They conduct like what was he doing at the board meetings if he went? I don't know. Did they zoom him in with a translator? I don't know. Maybe Hunter Biden learned Ukrainian for this job.
Well,
I
he's
don't
the
know about
smartest
that.
man that Joe Biden knows.
So I tracked this a little bit. So I think about the money. So they send me, there's Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a major part. Joe Biden sending $1 billion. Joe Biden sent them $1 billion about the prosecutor. He withheld $1 billion. I went back. I was just saying, well, how far back does this go? I went back a little further. The time before that, when they sent Ukraine $1 billion, it was John Kerry, and it was on March the 4th, 2014, like a couple days after the coup. John Kerry went to Ukraine under Joe Biden instructions, with Obama being part of it. And he said he brought $1 billion in loan and technical assistance. It's $1 billion. And I found an article on that. Well, I'll send Beverly some of these links if you want to put them in the notes. But yeah, he said, and some of the quotes, I wrote down some funny ones. Kerry, he says he doesn't understand Putin's objections to the U.S. giving the new Ukrainian government, who the CIA just helped oust a president, and Putin sure knew that the guy was handpicked, right? That spoofed phone call, tapped phone call release, that probably came through the Kremlin, right?
Yeah.
Who else would do that? Who else is good enough at that stuff to tap the Secretary of State and
and who cares? Like China maybe could do it, but what do they care? Of course it was Russia.
Do it. Yeah, China could do it. The Ocean's 11 team could do it. But,
right.
But who would do that? So Kerry said in this article, Kerry says he demands that Putin get the Russian troops out of Crimea. Like, it's a demand. He's saying Putin is trying to start a war. If he didn't want to start a war, he'd pull all the Russian troops out of Crimea. Well, there's a Navy base there, John.
Right. And he has an agreement, and there's a lease. Yeah.
They have a lease. Yeah. And he said Russia has been working hard to create a pretext to invade. That's I'm paraphrasing a John Kerry quote from 2014. Really? So in that March, like right after, Kerry met with all the leaders of the protest movement, and he met with the new president, which was picked by Victoria Nuland and Pryatt, and he met with the prime minister. Like, that's what he was doing there with $1 billion.
That was Yatsenyuk. Yeah, the new one. Yeah.
They called it the interim government, right? Because he didn't stay there that long before the next guys.
Right. Who was from, by the way, the Fatherland Party. That sounds not Nazi at all.
Fatherland Party. Where'd they get that name from? That's a good one.
I don't know.
I read another article, and I'll tell you, like, a really easy way to search, like, did people know this was going to happen? I thought, I know who probably knew about this. Ron Paul. I bet you Ron Paul knew about this.
Oh, sure.
So this morning, he was like, do a quick search. I did a quick search. Ron Paul, Ukraine 2014 coup. Like, the first thing that pops up, this article, it's saying that they're going to start a war. And this is in February. This is like a month before the coup. Sorry, let me find this. Like, did they know? Yeah, February 2014. He talks about Jeffrey Pyatt, what he was doing. He was caught on tape plotting the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Ukraine. Like, this is before the war. He said that Secretary of State John Kerry demanding that they cease using force against the rebels who are seeking to overthrow the government. Like, John Kerry in February was demanding that the Ukrainian government stop using force to prevent a violent overthrow of the government. You said that.
Led by that is very clearly led by, like, a lot of really right-wing Nazi type of people. Like, there's not argument there. Like, that's very clear.
There's no argument there. They were openly Nazis. Like, okay, they're not exactly the same as the Nazis in Germany in the 1940s, but they wear Nazi symbols. They honor the Nazi war heroes. They use their slogans.
A lot of anti-Semitism.
They carry the flag. Anti-Semitism. They got a couple other things. They also hate Russians. Like, okay, all right. So you hate Jews and Russians. Like, it's kind of the same thing, dude. And the Canadian embassy, when the police or the army, I guess, or even the military, trying to stop them, the Canadian embassy openly harbored these guys. Like, these Nazis went in there, and Victoria Nuland was involved. Like that's what
Yep.
they did with him. I guess they thought it was a little risky to let him go into the U.S. embassy, so they had him go into the Canadian embassy. Like, and the sniper, you talked about that head sniper. Like, supposedly, I've seen multiple sources say guy was trained by the CIA in Poland, like a few years before all this sniping was going on, and he was the head of that group that was sniping at certain government officials and not at other ones.
Right.
Like this goes way back, and this is as far as I went back. So there's $1 billion in 2014. There's $1 billion to prosecute. There's $1 billion right now going, and Joe Biden is all over this. That's why that video was taken down. You were the one who told me about that. The Ukraine on fire, the Oliver Stone video, where he's like interviews Putin, and they're saying, "Don't expand NATO. Like we can't do this." Like they do. That's why YouTube had to pull that video. It exposes Biden. So I think that tweet is right. Like, yeah, Biden's been at this. So to go all the way back to how you started this, when I said I was really skeptical that Biden said something off the top of his head that wasn't on script and it made sense, I think he's heard we got to get rid of Putin, and he's been part of figuring out how to get rid of Putin, even if it starts World War III, for decades. So that's in there. Biden's long-term memory's fine.
It's just it's rattling around in there from exposure.
And he slipped up. He slipped up and said it in public.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's what I think that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
Sometimes people say the truth if you listen to them. That does include Biden.
Yeah, often they'll slip up and make a mistake. Yeah.
They blurt out the truth under pressure.
I want to show, this was a work in progress that I actually abandoned a couple weeks ago, but I'm just going to show it so people can see, this wasn't much work that I did. And it's going to look like a crazy person's whiteboard, but I just look for connections between, like, okay, here's Ukraine, here's Yanukovych, here's Yatsenyuk, here's Yushchenko. What are their connections? And you can see it helps paint a picture of, like, okay, the CIA supported this guy. These guys are all massive right-wing people. These are all basically Nazi type of people. And you can see how they get inserted into the government. This is all basically just around 2014. But you can see the relation here. You can see that the U.S. has not been, shall we say, on the sidelines for any of this, and there's no Nazis involved. Like, and these are just the few major players from the 2014 timeframe. And if I had time, I would do more. But if you start to just do this kind of thing, if you start to just do this, you realize, holy crap, this doesn't even include Hunter. The Joe's here, but it doesn't include Hunter. It doesn't include the $1 billion. So it doesn't include anything. It's a very scant chart, but the connections here are eye-opening.
And you just graphically, you look at it, it gives you a good picture. Like, there's only, if I counted right, like the biggest degree of freedom is 4. Like, all these people tied to the U.S. government, with the biggest N being 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got cousins that are further away than this,
Right.
These people are all talking to each other, right?
They are.
We're talking to somebody who's talking. I know a guy who knows a guy. There's a lot of that going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the other thing I'm a little bit concerned about. So, when I look at the situation in Ukraine, I do feel bad for the Ukrainian people. I think they're stuck in the middle of this, Putin's aggression and the West's. I think the West is better at, Putin has the more masculine form of aggression, which is just right up, straight up. I'm gonna Will Smith you on stage, boom, right? Like, that's what I'm gonna do. And the West has a much more feminine, manipulative. I'm going to start a propaganda campaign, lie about you behind your back, set things up so that I can say, oh, look at how aggressive you got with me. How dare you? Right. So they're both bad. They're both toxic. and the Ukrainian people are stuck in the middle, and it really sucks. It would suck to be a Ukrainian, because I also can't tell what's we're hearing from mainstream media a lot of the Russians are violating they're violating there's war crimes that the Russians are committing against Ukrainians, and we're gonna, we're documenting all these and we're gonna go after them. But also, if you pay attention to alternate media, I just watched a video today. Guy had the blue tape armband on. The video, the guy that posted the video is from crap, I forget where it was, like some city in Ukraine. I don't remember the name of the city. Kharkov, Kharkov. I don't know how you pronounce it. And this is a video. He's saying it's a Ukrainian soldier. I don't know. I can't tell. He does have the blue armband thing, which is a sign for people who volunteer for Ukrainian army to do on the right arm. They keep switching it around. What's it supposed to be? But that's what it is right now. And he's killing. It's a horrible video to watch. He's murdering a guy ruthlessly with a knife, who's just lying on the ground screaming as he's getting stabbed, because he is suspected of having Russian contacts. And according to this, in the video, representative of the Ukrainian army executes a person in the most cruel way, accusing the person of having links with Russia. At the end of the video, the killer says, "Glory to Ukraine, death to enemies." And the guy who posted this, like, I'm in Kharkov, and this is what I worry about every day. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to say that particular. I'm not showing it because I don't. A, it's horrific. B, I don't know that it's legitimate. Like, I have no way to verify this. But if you look at the alternate media, there's a lot of alternate media showing, like, here's Ukrainians doing horrible things to Russians. So it's like, okay, well, it's kind of hard to tell. I was talking to my wife about this morning, and we thought maybe China's media is actually the least biased, because they kind of don't give a shit. They might be a little bit biased, but she said in Chinese media, there's lots of videos going around of Ukrainians pretending to be dead and, like, sitting up after being under a tarp to, like, have a smoke break and then go back down for a photo op or whatever. Like, there's, like, a lot of stuff going on. So we know, I mean, I certainly believe the claims that Putin is putting out propaganda, but we are too. And it's really hard to sort through what the hell is true.
It's all propaganda, right? So this, the false dichotomy of the good guys and the bad guys, like, actually, when you dig into it, they're all bad. It's all propaganda. Ukrainian government's bad. The Russian government's bad. The U.S. government's bad. So when you point out something that, well, maybe Putin actually made sense here, or maybe Zelensky said something that made sense, and surprise to me, Biden said something that made sense. Like, yeah, you should listen to them, but they're all putting out propaganda. They all have an agenda, and I don't think any of them have the agenda of peace. That's not what they want. And the Western, Putin talk about the Western influence, and talks about culture. I mentioned that you hear him; he sounds nationalist. He sounds to me like he could be, if he's in the U.S., he could probably run as a Republican. He just have to change a few things way he says things, but he'd be this kind of center right nationalist, pro country Republican. Invading other countries, that's not a good thing, but I don't think that's a big problem for a Republican or a Democrat president. Obama started more wars than any president in U.S. history. I mean, they have no problem with invading other countries and overthrowing governments. Like, that's fine in D.C., right? A lot of people make a lot of money on that. I'm glossing it over a little, but we have no. By we, I shouldn't even use that, because I admonished other people government for saying the government is the people. The U.S. government is in no position to tell other people how to run an election after our last election here. Like,
right?
Where do you get that? I would think.
And they also are in no position. Yeah, and they're also in no position to tell people whether they can or can't invade another country that they view as some sort of threat to them eventually. Like, it's in their best interest. We do things that are in our best interest all the time. Well, it's really important that we destroy Afghanistan and Iraq and or whatever, or support these guys in Syria and now the other guys in Syria, and like it's really important that we meddle in countries all the time that aren't on our border, because I'm putting really important in quotes, but that's the justification, right? And then suddenly when another country does it, not that it's good, but when another country does it, suddenly we're on our like moral high horse. How dare you hurt innocent people? Where have you been?
I hate the well, you did it too argument, but it is actually true. Like, you guys did it too. If Putin said, well, you did it too, what's the big deal? I mean, I think the U.S. government have to say, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's the you did it too argument is not a justification, but it is a reason. It is important to point out the hypocrisy of the West, right? Or Western leaders, we'll say.
You can just pick another area. You mentioned Afghanistan, Iraq. I don't remember which, but yeah, I mean, Afghanistan was invaded by the Russians. That's the last time Putin tried something like this that I know of. Or I mean, Russia tried something like this. They invaded Afghanistan. The U.S. government said, oh, we're going to give them their Vietnam. So guess what they did? They sent like tons of money and training and weapons to Osama bin Laden. That's how he got his start. And he successfully was a major Mujahideen. That's how the Taliban got going. And that's eventually how that whole organization was founded. It was to kick the Russians out of Afghanistan. And so the U.S. government's totally involved in that. Then like 10 years later, I guess we switched sides. I don't know. Osama bin Laden did get mad when they go into Iraq. Like, there's a big mess. Like, we spent 20 years and a couple $1 trillion to take Iraq from the Taliban and then turn it over to the Taliban with a bonus of leaving some helicopters and tanks and guns and stuff. And
you mean
destroy a country like Afghanistan. Yeah. I switched from Iraq. Iraq's more fun because then you can talk about how we funded Saddam Hussein, right? I'm old. I'm old enough to remember that. when
do you remember when even US Afghanistan? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to finish the Iraq one. That I'm not going all that far back, but if you recall, Iraq, when Saddam Hussein was kind of younger in power, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, and this was after the 79 coup, because since 59 to 79, Iran, when the CIA helped overthrow the democratically elected president of Iran in 54, I think it was 54, the coup there, totally CIA involved. Then the U.S. is like heavily part of Iran, funding all kind of trade. Girls are walking around in miniskirts in Tehran in the 60s. Like, that's a totally Western. And then, but that was really backlash to that. So we're funding Iran. We hate Iraq then. We're funding Iran. Then 79, they kind of switch. Then they encourage Saddam Hussein, hey, why don't you invade Iran? So then Saddam Hussein starts a war, goes on for 10 years. I don't remember the number, but like millions of people are killed in an ongoing 10-year war. U.S. is totally funding the one side, like, and Russia's funding the other side. Like, okay, everybody switch. And then you go a decade later, like, oops, now we're invading what was their buddy, Saddam Hussein. And now we're fighting him. And like, I hope you guys don't mind, but he's got lots of American weapons because we gave them to him. And all these people in his army are trained by the U.S. And who knows who's going on. So anyway, I kind of went off on a hypocrisy rabbit hole, but just trying to understand Ukraine at the 50,000 foot level, it looks the same. It looks very similar. And Biden is all over this, going back as far as I went. I didn't stop going back. I did stop going back. Biden's still there. Went back to before the Obama presidency. Biden is involved in this.
Yeah. And there's a I don't want to downplay the amount of propaganda that happens in the U.S. to legitimize the behavior of the government. We know that the CIA has explicitly talked about consulting with Hollywood and helping them portray America in the right way, and like that quote right way. We know that happens. I think even Obama signed some kind of legislation about that, but I don't remember what it was. But it happened before then. And if do you remember the old? Whenever you talk about the Mujahideen, I always remember there was an old James Bond movie with Timothy Dalton. Remember he was like James Bond for one or two movies.
I don't remember, but
he was in Afghanistan, and the Mujahideen were our friends, and like that was the thing. Like, oh yeah, well, because we're fighting the evil Russians, the evil Soviet Union, and they're the bad guys. But again, they're portrayed as these freedom fighters, and they're on our side. Oh yeah, they're dealing opium, but that's just because they need to pay the bills, and like this is what we're doing, and Hollywood helped set a narrative so that you would view like, oh yeah, we're helping these relatable freedom fighters. Nothing was portrayed of like these are kind of crazy religious zealots. No, we're helping the freedom fighters against the evil Russia, and so it paints this very simplistic, Crayola representation of everything. And so the American people, they're bought into the whole thing. And I don't, and there were other movies. There are plenty of movies about that featured. I think one of the Rambo movies featured stuff in Afghanistan, and the Russians were bad, and like
the Russians were bad, and the U.S. was helping the freedom fighters. Right?
The freedom
and
fighters
Rambo
again
jumps in and gets involved.
Yeah,
then he escapes to Pakistan. Like that was the place to back off. Like you go to Pakistan, they're buddies.
Yeah,
because before Pakistan had nuclear weapons.
It's just the whole thing is so. I mean, it would be funny. It's also just it's depressing.
Yes, when I'm laughing, just to be clear here, it's because I might start crying. Like if you don't laugh, you'll cry at this. Like it's ridiculous. So yeah, everybody's bad, and as soon as you say something, you get attacked as being a Putin apologist or somebody else apologist, Biden or Trump or who knows. Next thing you know, I'm a apologist for the Sandinistas. When Oliver North was involved in brokering weapons that they sold to Iran. I forget the whole deal, but the Sandinistas and anti-Sandinistas, and they overthrow Nicaragua. Like the U.S. is, like you say, hypocritical. That's what you say. Us defending an election and defending a democracy. And even though you can say it's evil, what Putin's doing is horrible.
Sure, yeah.
But what Ukraine is doing is horrible, and what the U.S. government is doing is horrible. And now you're just playing this game of like, who's worse? Like, I don't even want to get into that game.
Yeah. Ramo Grey Wolf has said something in chat, which it's interesting. It's funny to me how funny, but it's, I think intellectually interesting and just worth noting how interconnected things are. He says, the world needs opium supply. Why can't we legalize and they can be their own businessmen, no longer shoved into a black market? I think there's something interesting to note about that. By making opium black market, as he also points out, poppy is one of the only crops that can really grow in Afghanistan. It's a difficult environment. By making things like this illegal, it gives us power, because the truth is, whenever the opium lords are on the right side of the narrative based on who's in control, we are willing to look the other way and let them do whatever they want. The black market is just, I mean, in a world in which the government ultimately controls the entire economy and is willing to shoot you for not paying a cigarette tax or whatever the hell when they're willing to do anything, the legitimate market and the black market are actually just two shades of gray. And you can go to jail for being in a legitimate market, but not crossing T's and dotting I's or doing whatever it is your government wants. And you can be allowed to operate if it fits the long-term agenda of some globalist, either some globalist agenda or there's some longer-term agenda that the U.S. cares about. And so sure, sell your opium. But it's a way to give regulating things and making things illegal is a way not just to get power over your own population, but it gives power over everything, because we justify a lot of extra extracontinental military activity, or I won't say extracontinental, extranational military activity through the war on drugs. That's our justification. Well, we got to shut down this supply. We got to do this. We got to do that. Like, all right. So either you support the right people that we want, or we're going to start going after you for trading in opium or whatever it is. I imagine the same thing happens in South America for other
South America, except it's just coca leaves that grow good there. So it's cocaine. So yeah, so the CIA is importing cocaine into the U.S. and shipping drugs down to the Sandinistas, with George Bush, the older one, involved, and that's tied with Iran, that they're using that to support Iran, and that's after Congress told the CIA, you're not allowed to fund the anti-Sandinistas anymore. So they had to switch how they did it. So they went into the drug business. They have no problem with that. They did it in Vietnam. Like Vietnam, they were bringing drugs back in. Like the U.S. government has no problem with the drugs business. You see it happening now we're really off topic, but you see it happen with marijuana, right? That you can go from, you're going to serve 20 years in jail for selling marijuana to you might have to serve 7 years in jail for not paying your income tax on the marijuana that you're selling.
Right.
And that happened. Like I took a nap and it's like switched. And now I drive around, and I live in Florida. There's like signs all over the place for pot. I'm like, why does this gas station have a pot sign? Big green leaf, CBD oil. Like, this is weird. Like, this wasn't like this when I was in high school. I mean, you say the government wants to be your drug dealer. First, they hate drug dealers. They'll shoot you for it. Now they want to be the drug dealer. They don't care.
Yeah. And something that I would say to the people who are all about legalizing marijuana, which obviously I agree with, philosophically, remember that the states that are legalizing it, very few of them are actually legalizing it in the way that you imagine. It's not like it doesn't become like any other thing you just buy at the store. They're viewing, because the states have gotten so bloated and bureaucracy's gotten so big, they are rubbing their hands in greed, going, oh, an industry we can regulate and extract money from, and it totally distorts the industry. And it means if you're a big player with a lot of money and can willing to bribe people or afford lobbyists to have the laws work in your way, you get the grift off of it. And if you were just a dude who was kind of a normal drug dealer on the street selling marijuana, and now you want to go legit, like, it's not that easy. You can't really do that. That's not the goal. The goal is not to make it legal. The goal is to make it theirs. That's what the goal is.
It's still not, the idea of a free market and just marijuana. And marijuana is a great example because it's such a mild drug, and it's just a weed that just grows.
Right.
But farmers, there's some expertise to being good at it. The places where they're changing the rules on that, is it more of a free market now than it was when I was in high school? Maybe not.
No, in fact, I will say
more of a free market back then.
Yeah, a lot of people look to California because it's very famous for cannabis,
they were first.
Especially. Well, no, Colorado, like other states were first.
Oh, Colorado.
Although California did medical stuff earlier. Yeah. But people look up in the north. It's very well known for growing. And something that I think people don't realize, at least last I checked, which might have been a year or so ago, but since California made recreational cannabis legal, the black market's still bigger than the legit market, because they put so much regulation and so much bureaucracy in between, the plant and the consumer, that a lot of people and actually a lot of the growers voted against legalization because this is what they thought. They were like, oh no, they're going to regulate the hell of it. It's much better just be on the black market. Like, just do our thing. And so now it's heavily regulated, and you still have a black market. But the cops that go after you are different than the other cops. These are cops that are mad that you're not paying taxes or going through the regulatory rule, following the regulatory rules, rather than the war on drugs cops. It's a different set of cops, but different black market's still there. Yeah.
Still the thin blue line is still doing its job.
Yeah.
getting money
Because
for
they
the
have to have
government,
something to do. Yeah.
protecting the government, getting money for the government.
Right. It's
The
just like
exact method.
it's analogous
Tax
to
cops.
the crop. Yeah. It's analogous to the end of the Soviet Union, right? But I heard Putin say this, which this is one of those things that I totally agree with what that he said. He was like, well, when the Soviet, I'm paraphrasing, but like when the Soviet Union fell apart, the question becomes like, well, what do you need NATO for? Can we join NATO? And he said, we asked the US if we could join NATO, and they were like, no, I
No,
can't fucking join NATO.
that would ruin
He's like,
it.
well, why not?
That would ruin
Yeah,
it.
it's an anti-U club. What are you talking about? Yeah, like you're not allowed in the anti-Russia club.
Well,
But
we need another. We would need
an
another
enemy.
Russia. Like, who would be the Russia? You say, okay, well,
Right.
should we pick China? Maybe if Putin said, hey, let's pick China. And we say,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
yeah,
He
okay,
needed to
that's
come
cool.
in with a bad
That's
guy.
cool. You can come. Need a bad guy, right? Like,
yeah,
like
but he
when
was a
the
little bit too early. China
Japanese.
wasn't as big of a threat at that point, so he needed. Yeah, it would have been better if they waited for.
You have to have an enemy. Remember reading the quote of I forgot his name, the Japanese prime, whatever they call him, the king, I guess, before, as World War II was kicking off, when the emperor, when they were trying
Hirohito
to
or whoever it was, yeah,
get Hirohito, I think he might have been a general, but they were trying to get Japan, like Hitler's like wants to fire up Japan too. Let's be a team. And the Japanese emperor said, like, this is awesome what you're doing here. Like, I'm paraphrasing, he didn't use that word, but he thought it was great. And he said, and Hitler's like, you should do this too. You should do this too. And he says, but we have no Jews. Like, he thought it was a great idea, but Japan, guess what? Japan's like 100% Japanese. They had no, and this is like in 1935 or something. What do you think Japan looked like? You know what it looks like now? Like, what did it look like in 1935?
Yeah. There was
like
one
Korean guy walking around and was like, what's this Korean guy doing here? let alone a Jew. Like, and he didn't care about, he wasn't anti-Semitic, really. He needed an enemy. That was really my point. I know it's kind of a silly joke, but you need an enemy, and NATO needs an enemy. Like, without an enemy, how can you justify spending $1 trillion a year? You need an enemy.
Yeah.
And Putin does play the enemy good. He's he kind of plays the part nicely, you know.
He does.
I don't know who they would use if they didn't have him. China doesn't really work. China doesn't work very well.
Shirtless on a horse or something for them, so they got good photo ops for, like, look at the crazy enemy. Like, yeah, she doesn't do that.
I'm talking to you through a laptop that was made in China. I'm looking at you through a camera that was made in China. You know, I do have some Russian products here. I was going to bring a bottle. When all this happened, like the second day, I wrote an article. I was really mad. Like, what are you talking? The Russian people didn't do anything. What are you mad at the Russian people for? And we were almost out of vodka. Occasionally we have a happy hour vodka drink. Like, we could get some vodka. I want Russian vodka because I don't care about the people that, my point earlier about the people, like, I think the people making vodka in Russia, they didn't invade Ukraine. They're probably trying to get on the bus to go to work, and they're mad their Apple Pay doesn't work. They can't get on the subway. So I went to got on the Total Wine website. Nope, it's all pulled. You look up Russian vodka brands on Total Wine, it redirects you to a page with the Ukrainian flag. I'm like, I'm tired of the Ukrainian flag. It's a cool flag with the wheat and the sky and all, but every time I go for a walk, there's Ukrainian flags all over the place. Like, these people took down whatever they had up before. I guess the COVID emblem or something. I don't know what they had up before. Now they got Ukrainian flags. Anyway, yeah, that one. And they go to another one. There's another wine store here. Go on their webpage. Nope, can't get in there. But I found one. So yeah, we bought a big bottle of Russia Standard vodka. Pretty good. I say, well, I support the Russian people. I support the Ukrainian people. I support the American people. I support the Afghan people. I support the Iranian people. I know people who lived in Iran for 20 years and left in 79. Like, Iran is a cool place. I mean, and the people there, most people in most countries are fine. I mean, everywhere you go in the world, like, it turns out most people are actually cool. But
they just want to live their lives and be normal, like most people. And that includes Ukrainian. And I think it includes Crimea and Donbass.
and it includes the Polish people in the western part of Ukraine that would just as soon be in Poland now and are flooding the borders trying to get out.
Yeah.
These people know what Russia could do. I mean, I don't like to compare Russia to the Soviet Union, but there is some analogies there. Like Russia has done this sort of thing. If you want to talk about Russia, I don't know if the people there are easier to get to do this, but it's a super oppressive place. Like, see the journalists hold up a sign, stop the war, they arrest her. Like,
Yeah.
You don't really know what the Russian people think, what the majority of Russian people, they could get put in jail for telling you what they think. They don't just get kicked off of Twitter. And there's a lot of Western influences. You start like the whole culture is moving, Western culture is moving closer. And Putin has complained about the influx of the LGBTQ plus and woke ideology and the gender dysphoria and destruction of the family. I listened to a whole speech he made a couple months ago. It was, I told you, I got done, like, if you took like 4 words out, it would be a Republican Party campaign speech for president. Like it was, except he doesn't really like the idea of people having weapons. Yeah, you wouldn't want to ask him about that question. But on the culture stuff, he just sounded like a center-right nationalist to me. And he doesn't like seeing what's going on in Ukraine and in some of the other countries. Like I was reading a little bit about, I'll probably get these wrong, Latvia, Estonia, with some of the ones above, like the prime minister of, I think it was Latvia or Estonia, like he grew up in New Jersey. Born and raised in New Jersey. I listened to a little bit. He's the same. I think as a former prime minister, he's the same accent as me.
Toombs,
like I forget that. I don't want to quote names because I can't forget.
Okay.
But and I said, wow. I look at the next country, Estonia or something. That guy went to Penn. He grew up in Delaware. Like his family left in like the 50s. His parents left in the 50s because of the Soviet Union, and he's born and raised in Delaware. He went to University of Pennsylvania, and then when the Soviet Union collapsed, he went back to his country, and now he's the prime minister. Like
Tomas Hendrik.
A lot of Western.
I think that's his
Hendrik.
name. Yeah, Tomas.
Is he the one from New Jersey or the one from Delaware?
Let me
one
look.
Of them's, I forget.
He went to Columbia and University of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, grad school.
New Jersey. Leonia, New Jersey. He grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah, North Jersey. Yeah. I think he has a little more of a New York accent. I have a South Jersey accent. But I like, you hear him talk like, yeah, I recognize that accent. He's the president of Latvia. Is that what
Estonia.
Prime Minister? Estonia.
PM of Estonia.
I apologize to people from there. My knowledge of all these places, I certainly know about them. I know where they are. They border Russia. I know that. They're a little north of the area we're talking about. But anyway, my point was
fourth president from 2006 to 2016. There we go.
So if you think like, will Putin start a war? Kick back and think, what does Putin see? And you don't have to apologize for him. You can just say, what does he see? He sees Zelensky talking about joining NATO, talking about developing nuclear weapons. He sees the U.S. talking about putting missile sites, 20-minute flight time from Moscow. He sees a guy from New Jersey that's the prime minister of a country on his border. like you're saying, okay, what if the prime minister of Canada grew up in Moscow and was a communist, hardcore communist? Actually, maybe he did. That's off topic.
I was going to say, isn't Trudeau?
Yeah, I didn't mean that. Let's switch to Mexico, a freer place, or say, Syria. I don't want to talk about if you want to compare countries, like we could talk about Sydney, Australia, which is a really terrible, oppressive place to live. Like, yeah, you're better off in Syria right now. Damascus is, you can walk out on the street, go to a restaurant in Damascus. Like, Damascus is fine. I'd rather live in Damascus than Sydney. Anyway,
I really want to say Damascus,
got
but
off
okay.
topic.
Damascus.
That's Sydney. Damascus is a freer place, a less oppressive place to live right now. But it could change next week. All these places are changing. we strayed from the topic.
That's all right. I mean,
or maybe not, or maybe we didn't. We talk about the hypocrites.
Yeah, no, and I think it's
nature of the media.
This is one of the biggest. I mean, there's a lot of black pills that I've been swallowing lately, but one of the biggest ones is this war serves as a reminder to me that both the right and left are pretty united on supporting the military-industrial complex and inflating and or taxing us to support wars financially, and if need be, get involved. I mean, I'm still not sure we won't actually be involved, like physically at some point. I don't know.
We are involved. We already are involved.
No, but I mean, like troops. Like Biden's alluded to sending troops at some point, and like, I mean, we're sending equipment, we're sending money. It's a little bit of a black pill to realize that, like, the people in charge, no matter what party, they all seem to be pretty excited about the prospect of killing innocent people and getting involved in that, and like that's their
send the money to talk about the no-fly sign. You hear Hillary Clinton, go, you got to protect the people of Ukraine. Like what? It's the same party, like you said, and this idea that we're not involved. They talk about like we're heavily involved, and have been for decades. Like I was thinking through like a home invasion analogy. So here's a scenario. Sometimes this will help a normie understand this. So suppose your neighbors come to you on your block and they say, we're going to break into Jeff's house, John's house next door, and like take all his stuff. And you say, I don't want any part of that. That's not cool. I don't want to be involved in that. But you go to all the planning meetings and you think about it like, well, if we do this, he's going to get really mad, and we go back and forth. And then when they decide, okay, we are going to invade, then you stand out on the sidewalk right in front of his front door and you hand guns to every person. Here's a gun, here's a gun, here's a gun, here's a gun. But no, I'm not involved. I'm on the sidewalk. I'm not going in the house. Like I'm not part of this home invasion. I'm just out here on the sidewalk, minding my own business, handing guns to people. That's what we're doing. I don't know. Do the normies understand that example? Because it's the same thing. Sorry, I went off a little bit there. You know what I mean, though. The analogy of an individual often helps people understand a situation. And there's my analogy. Is it okay to stand on the sidewalk and hand guns to the guys running in your neighbor's house to take his stuff or to take over the house? I don't know. Maybe they're going to squat there.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. So when I say we're involved, like we're deeply involved and have been for decades. And all these same names keep coming up, including Joe Biden. I hope we don't get kicked off YouTube for talking about this.
No, but I mean, it is true. I mean, you just have to go watch. I mean, go look at some of the stuff that's been said in the past. Like we said earlier, the Oliver Stone documentary has been deleted from YouTube for a reason. You can still find it.
Ukraine on fire. You can find it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's Odyssey. Even if you can't find it on YouTube, it's also on Vimeo and whatever. Yeah, but I mean, this is stuff that was mainstream. Like they were willing to admit. The only reason that it's being thrown down the memory hole now is because it's inconvenient facts. As Al Gore would say, it's an inconvenient truth. Some of this stuff,
it's an inconvenient truth, and we've been involved. I was looking up Obama when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about here. How much did he know about Joe Biden? And so I found an article. And this is a quote, like Obama admitted that the U.S. brokered a deal to transition power in Ukraine. That's a CNN interview in 2015. The article's there, and there's a video of it. And the video says video unavailable. It's a YouTube link. So like that was probably there since 2015. Fine. But I didn't go into the Wayback Machine and try to find it. But it was an article using that as the proof, and that video's been removed. Like they don't want us to hear Obama in 2015 saying that the U.S. brokered a deal to transition power in Ukraine, but Obama said it.
Yep.
And his Secretary of State, his ambassador to Ukraine, and his vice president were all heavily involved. They don't want us to hear about that, and that's one of the lies that the mainstream media is it's one of the things they're not telling us about, not talking about.
Yeah.
An investigative journalist should be going down this whole path. I want a timeline, and I don't have a timeline. I can just tell there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah. All right, we've done Ukraine for an hour and a half, Keith. Let's switch.
And we
to
need another journalist.
I know, but let's switch to a little bit of frivolity. I apologize. I apologize for Elle's absence.
Hats.
She will be back. I don't know what's going on with her today.
I'll put another hat on. Try to get my
that's good. Yes,
my head straight.
Yeah, do that. Put another hat. Let's just do something frivolous. Did you see the Oscars? Did you see the famous clip from the Oscars?
Oh, I was afraid you were going. No, I didn't.
I am, because some people in chat were talking about it, and I think it's kind of funny.
The Oscars. Okay, yeah. Let me see. This will be a fresh reaction.
So, the clip that I have is I'm gonna have to preface this. So, Chris Rock was hosting, and he made a joke. So Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, I guess is her name. I guess she has a disease called alopecia, and her hair was starting to fall out or whatever. Like eventually, I think you lose all your hair eventually. So she's shaved her head to kind of preempt that. So it's not patchy or whatever. She just shaved her head and embraced the bald thing. And Chris Rock made some joke about her being in G.I. Jane 2. Because I guess in G.I. Jane, which I never watched, but G.I. Jane featured an actress with a bald head, I guess. I don't know if it was Sinead O'Connor or someone playing Sinead O'Connor, but regardless, it was G.I. Jane 2 featured an actress with a shaved head, and so that was his comment. And he makes the comment, and you see the camera goes to like Will Smith for a second, and Will's initial reaction is to laugh, and the camera goes away, and then presumably Will changes his mind. Someone says it was Demi Moore. Thank you for that. Presumably he changes his mind, and he walks up onto stage. So let me show you this.
This sounds good.
Yeah.
And I do have a hint about what Will did. I know that Will Smith did something because people have been.
Yeah. You ready?
Doing Yeah, go.
Oh, wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
ウィル・スミスにやられました。
Wow, dude. It was a G.I. Jane joke.
G.I. Jane のジョークだったんです。
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television.
テレビ史上最高の。
Sorry, there's Japanese in the background because the American version is censored. They don't let the F word show up.
They don't want us to see. I always like Will Smith as an actor.
He won.
He's pretty good. I don't think he was acting. He didn't seem like he was acting there. I think that's the real Will Smith. And now I understand some of the memes that I've seen and comparisons of Will Smith. All I know is Will Smith hit somebody. I have no idea why. Yeah, that's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I Chris Rock's joke was rude, but you don't need to go smack someone for it. I think it's just I see a lot of like pent up anger in that guy just for like. Yeah, there's just a lot of anger. He didn't apologize. So he apologized to everyone else.
That'll be interesting to see if he backs down and apologizes eventually.
He didn't. And there is like debate. Some people say it wasn't over the line. Judson, do you mean the joke or the smack? Because some people have said like, yeah, defending his wife, like, and even though I think it's assault, I don't think it's like, I wouldn't put the guy in jail for it. I'd be like, he hit him once. It was inappropriate. I'd probably fine him and be like, look, don't do that. It's not, I wouldn't
He slapped him. Is that what he did?
I think he slapped him. Yeah. And Judson said he meant the joke. He says the joke wasn't over the line. I don't think it was particular. I mean, it was, I guess Will's just very sensitive about it. I don't know. So I'm not a guy who cares about celebrities usually at all, and I never watch the Oscars. I never think about watching the Oscars, but it was all over Twitter, so I had to go look at it, and there's your.
Well, I guess I mean there's a good part about it is I did find out that the Oscars happened. I mean I didn't know about that. I was another
STE
super
York says. I think I'd be permanently mad too if the last time my wife had hair, it was my son's best mate pulling it. I don't know exactly what that joke is because I don't really follow, but I have a vague idea. My understanding is that he's in an open marriage with his wife. So,
I mean, I thought maybe it was something to do with G.I. Jane 2, whatever that is. I'm pretty sure I saw G.I. Jane 1, which was a fun movie.
Yeah.
If I remember right. And I don't think it was Demi Moore. But
someone said
I remember that as being kind of a fun movie. You know, an obvious plot kind of movie, but fun. If you need a frivolous evening, that's my recollection of that one. I didn't know there was a sequel. And usually
I don't think there is a sequel. I think he's joking about there being a sequel. I don't think there is a sequel.
Oh.
He was saying that she should be in the sequel because she has a shaved head. That was the joke.
Yeah.
It wasn't particularly. It is
but she
Demi
doesn't
Moore,
have
by
a
the way.
shaved head going into it. Demi Moore.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a shaved head going into it. I think they shave her head because she decides to join the army or whatever, the Marines.
Oh, really?
It is. Then she turns out to be a great Marine. That's the movie. Spoiler alert. I would say it's a spoiler alert, except like 10 minutes into it, you can already guess what the plot's going to be. So yeah, it's like a dippy, typical girl thing. Girly girl shows up at the army barracks and they shave her head and she can't hardly do anything. And then it turns out she becomes the great army person at the end. It's a fun movie. If I had a teenage daughter, I might watch it with.
Yeah,
it's a women can do it kind of a movie. If I'm remembering, I hope I'm not mischaracterizing.
It's a girl power movie.
Yeah,
I think we have too many girl power movies now, but that's fine.
It's fun. Sit down and have a glass of wine and watch a movie, and when you don't feel like doing anything some evening, that kind of movie.
Yeah,
I think it was fun. But yeah, I hope there isn't a sequel where that Will Smith isn't in it. He's a little old for army movies now.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah. So that's like another topic. Yeah. If you switch hats, like what's another thing they're not talking about? Like where's Fauci?
Yeah, I was gonna say they're talking about this. We don't have to dwell on Will Smith. What else are they not talking about that we should be talking about?
I could think of several things. Like what happened to Fauci? Like, does Putin get the Nobel Prize for medicine?
Yes.
Fauci seems to be gone. And that was a line that was like, oh, let's go do this. Let's go do this Ukraine thing. And everybody's like, Ukraine, where's my flag? Where's my flag? Fauci's gone. Yemen, nobody's talking about Yemen. Like, I think that should be like all
what's going
over
on
the
in
news.
Yemen? Tell us.
Well, the U.S. government for many years has been buying oil from Saudi Arabia and supporting their invasion and bombing and killing, basically genocide in Yemen. And that's ongoing. You can say, well, we're not part of it. Well, we refuel the planes and we do all the plane maintenance. The U.S. could stop that tomorrow if they wanted. Like the Saudis are not going to keep American fighters going and ballistic missiles and like, they know how to do some of that stuff, but they're oil guys. Like they know how to do oil pretty well, but even that's with our help. Like, so that's a story that I think is not being discussed that should be. What's happening in Yemen. Think of some others. How about the national debt? Like, where's this $1 billion coming from? How long is it going to be before they collapse the money system? Like, should I buy all Bitcoin or all? I don't know what to do.
Have you noticed that the stories about the increasing stories about how prices are high because of this or that or whatever, and it's all
Putin.
designed with one goal, which is whatever the reason prices are high, it's not Joe Biden and it's not inflation. Like, those are the things it's not. As long as it's not one of those two things, any harebrained theory about why prices are rising somewhere is printable, as long as it doesn't blame Biden and as long as it doesn't blame money printing.
Yeah. Or
Which
blame
is,
Trump, by the way, because this,
Yeah. Sure, you can blame Trump, yeah.
or Obama or Bush or however far you want to go back. But you have to remember, like, Trump, I mean, Congress did it. Congress proposed it,
Right.
but it's a president bill. Trump signed it. Trump totally promoted the idea. Print money, the stimulus checks. Like, you could back up a little and say, if you don't like the gas price right now, why did you cash your $1,200 check that Trump signed? But so you can talk about the subject, but if you're talking to
you can blame Trump, but you can't blame the money printing part of Trump, because you can't blame money printing. That's not allowed.
Because money printing is fine if you're,
Because everyone
Keynesian
likes
theory has taken over.
Yeah.
But that's obvious. Like, I mean, you don't have to know very much about economics, like actual real economics, to have seen this happening 100 years ago. It's just a continuing flow. So I see, like, very conservative, hardcore Republicans that think they should put Trump back in 2024 and justifiably see Biden as a disaster. Like, yeah, okay, that part's true. But if you had Trump as president, are you saying that gas wouldn't be, I know it's higher in California, but, over $4-5 a gallon? Like, I don't know that. Like, I think Trump didn't really like Putin. I don't know what Trump would have done.
I mean, he'd
but
allowed,
the printing,
he would allow more pipelines and that kind of stuff in the U.S., but he did want to print money, so
wanted to print
you'd
money.
still get
He
that
wanted to
inflation.
Yeah, I mean, it happens with every president. So you can look at each president with very few exceptions. Like, Trump was the biggest borrow and spend president in U.S. history until Biden came along. And the same is true about Obama. The same is true pretty much all the way back, way back.
All the way back to Jimmy Carter. I don't know if that was true for Jimmy Carter, but like, Reagan would definitely borrowed more than Jimmy Carter, and I think almost everyone after him that kept going.
But you can look at the graph of the national debt, and it's just, and you look at the graph of what they're printing, and you look at the graph of inflation, and guess what? It's all tied together. So that's something that the media isn't talking about. This is a house of cards. This is not a sustainable system. You can't get a new credit card to pay off your credit card, and when that one hits a limit, get a new credit card, and then get a new credit card, and then get a new credit card, and only write checks for the interest. You can't keep doing that.
You can if everyone thinks that you are going to go bomb other people and steal their stuff to pay for it eventually. Which I think is what the U.S. has been counting on.
You can keep it going.
Yeah.
And I'm not the one to predict when it's going to end. I have no idea, because if you asked me 20 years ago, I would say this is going to fall apart. And if you asked me 10 years ago, I would say this is going to fall apart. So predicting the future has a terrible track record. I think they can keep this going for a while more. Maybe it'll last till I'm dead. I don't know. I wouldn't count on it.
So we can actually link this back to some of the stuff that we've talked about already, because one of the things that I think that was smart that Putin did, by the way, it's amazing that calling him doing something smart is now supporting him. Like, you could be smart and evil. That's a combination that's possible, by the way, just to point that out to people. But one thing that he did was smart was, after all these banking sanctions, he was like, okay, well, if you can only pay for your gas in rubles, it's just like, oh, so you kind of have to be dealing in rubles, and like, that's, he can do that. And my suspicion is that China behind the scenes is going to help him resist some of these Western sanctions. But we talked about Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and recently someone points out in chat there was a Saudi oil terminal that was bombed by a Yemeni group. In fact, it was near the Formula One race this weekend was in Saudi Arabia, and it was near there, and there was extra security added, and the drivers were nervous because this had been bombed, and supposedly they are talking to China about denominating oil sales in yuan. And the petrodollar is one of the reasons for our reserve currency status is the petrodollar. It's one of the reasons that we can, everyone has to peg everything to the dollar. It's the standard. And I think, I don't think it'll happen overnight, but I think slowly people are going to start abandoning it. And China doesn't really, they hold a lot of dollars. So they don't want them to crash overnight. It's not an optimal strategy for them, but taking over and becoming the petro yuan, like it's totally possible. And
maybe
it will change the balance of power.
In the end, it's a messy thing. It'll be messy and uncomfortable, but maybe in the end, it's a competition currency, which is a good thing. I would rather the yuan wasn't the yuan or the ruble, right. But that is actually the outcome of what they're doing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get oil to be traded between Russia and certainly Iran, maybe Turkey, China, Pakistan, and more, maybe Europe, and they'll start trading in yuan. That could happen. They've already, when they shut down the SWIFT system, the international money exchange between banks. So like as part of the so-called sanctions, where they basically the U.S. government attacking the U.S. people and the Russian people. All that happened with that is they're like, okay, I guess we need to set up another one. And they set up another one. I forget the name, but they'll be back up to speed eventually with the replacement for that. It's not that hard. They got software people in China and Russia.
Yes,
Russia
they do.
can put satellites up. Like they have people that can write software. They'll figure out banking software, and they're going to set up an international currency exchange. And guess what? It's not going to be based in dollars.
Right.
That's the end result here. And I look at it kind of, if you want to, think about ending kind of the good thing. To me, in the end, like competition and currency is a good thing. I think Bitcoin's a good thing. I think getting rid of the petrodollar is a good thing in the end because it's going to make it harder for them to destroy the value of the US dollar. And I don't want them to do that. I'm sort of retired and it matters to me that the dollar holds its value. So what they're doing now is destroying the value of the dollar. And you don't see that on the evening news. Like they don't want to talk about that. All they do is say, let's send $1 billion to Ukraine. Like, well, where are you getting that from? They're getting it from us in the end. They're getting it from us. Or our kids, our grandkids.
I was going to say we focus on taxes a lot often, but it's if you're someone who cares about the effect on the poorest people, printing is worse. Printing is a tax that disproportionately affects the livelihoods of the poorest people. I mean, you could argue, well, it affects everyone equally because it's printing. That already is not the same as the income tax, which is proportional. So it's already, if you're kind of which I'm obviously not, but if you're kind of this progressive mindset that like the rich should pay a higher percentage and the poor should pay less, printing, no one pays less. Like they all pay the same. And worse than that, it impacts the poor worse because they need to spend it, and they can't move it. They live off a much higher percentage of their income, and the rich can move money around and try different move things to different assets to hedge bets. You can move your money into other currency. You can there's things that you can do to kind of minimize the impact that this has on you. And a small percentage of your day-to-day expenses is, you have to keep that in dollars so that you can, but it's a small percentage of your wealth. But if your day-to-day expenses are 100% of your wealth, if it's, you're living hand to mouth, you're paying those higher prices for everything. And we ignore it. And then I guess worse is what you're alluding to is when we borrow it, then it's like, okay, well,
Destroying.
now your kids and grandkids are paying for it because they're going to have to. It's like, can you imagine taking out a credit card at one of these like ridiculous interest rate credit cards, maxing it out, and then giving it to your grandkids as a gift? That's what we're doing. Hey,
That's what you're doing.
there's nothing left on it, but you got to pay it off later.
Mm-hmm. That's the ultimate okay boomer thing. Like
that is
the boomers are that they're paying for stuff today, paying for goodies today, using money that you borrow from your kids. So yeah, people do notice income tax. They see that. So like with Trump, not to harp on Trump anymore, but the tax was cut. Income tax were cut. That's cool. Corporate taxes were cut. That's cool. A lot of companies pulled stuff back into the U.S. They want to return that. That tax is very visible. A lot of people don't recognize the tax of borrowing and printing money. Like those are two separate taxes that devalue the dollar. I don't know what the numbers are, but maybe they're the biggest taxes. And, say like, okay, it's great. They changed the, corporate tax down to 25 or whatever they did from 40 or something. Like, okay, that's cool. Or they changed the top marginal tax from 39, whatever it is, to 37 or 36. Like people see that like, oh, 3%, but they're not recognizing that they printed $1 trillion or so. That's a huge, huge tax, bigger than this income tax stuff we're talking about. And it's long-term. And the borrowing is a separate kind of tax where we're paying interest. Like someday, maybe it's going to be in my lifetime, interest might be the highest expenditure of the federal government. And if they're unable to keep interest rates low by force, because there's no free market in money or in loans, if they lose control of the low interest rates, it's kept artificially low, the service of the national debt will be out of control. I don't know how to fund that. I don't think, and they're not thinking about it. That's a news item that you don't hear much about, but there are people that recognize this and see a disaster coming there.
It
And
certainly
Biden
affects
is
people's
making it
lives
worse.
much more than what Russia is doing, right?
Yeah. In the end, yes.
I mean, you get everyone excited about putting a Ukrainian flag in their Twitter profile and getting excited about all that, but in the meantime, your livelihood's being taken away from you by force and destroyed through monetary policy. Monetary policy is a tough one because people their eyes glaze over. They don't want to talk about it. It seems kind of boring, but it has such an impact on. It's just not an immediate impact. It's not as obvious. It's not as immediate, but it's got a much bigger impact on people's lives than they regularly recognize and imagine. And it's how politicians get away with almost everything that they do is they print money, borrow money, whatever, so that they can fund whatever their pet projects are at your expense. So, all right. Well, Keith, any last things? We've gone for just about 2 hours. Any last comments, thoughts?
People are not the government.
Yeah, it's a good thing to remember. I find myself saying that all the time. I'll say we or whatever. And it's like, it's not we. I didn't vote for any of these people. And someone sometimes people get on my case for saying, like, talking about boomers as a class, and they're technically correct because not all boomers did this either, right? Some boomers opposed this their whole lives and didn't do this. The boomers as a group did some damage.
Me, actually, I'm a
Right.
tail end, technically a tail end. I think I'm the last year or something, but or within a few years. I don't know where the line is, but technically I'm a boomer, but I'm not a boomer really. I don't think.
Right.
It's
a
group
the word
categorization. Doesn't work at the edges like every other group like that.
Yeah, and I think in many ways the word boomer has ceased to be about time that you were born and more about an attitude and that kind of thing. So
I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for Joe Biden.
Greg DeBarrett
Actually, I
points out
didn't.
Pelosi and Biden are silent generation. Yeah,
The
so
silent
they also
generation.
they're
Yeah.
the silent generation is the policy, the kind of bureaucrats, the middle managers keep their heads down and keep doing the thing. They don't have big visions, but they just kind of keep expanding the government. Right?
Is that the one after the greatest generation? The last time the
so.
government tried to start a world war?
Yes.
Or successfully.
So next generation.
So hopefully they aren't successful this time, but it is the same kind of thing. That's kind of the ultimate question. Will they manage to start World War III? They're trying pretty hard. They are trying pretty hard. I hope they don't. And that's all I feel like I could do is try to point out, like, don't start World War III. That's not a good idea. It didn't really go well in the end last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I forget who we had a conversation with the other day, but I think a lot of people are kind of saying, "Oh, they're not about to start World War III. We should, stop talking about that. That's not about to happen." I'm not convinced that. I don't know. I think they could mistakenly start World War III pretty easily.
I think they could. I wrote an article the day after the invasion called "Will they successfully start World War III?" And I don't know, what was that, 3-4 weeks ago? Like, everything I wrote in there is still true. Like, I want to write a part 2 on it and just continue on with that thoughts. But that's what it looked like to me the day after the invasion. And I do think that is not saying that they want to annihilate the Earth, but that is what you're talking about. You got all this saber rattling between the countries that have 90% of the nuclear weapons on the Earth. So this could vary. The outcome here could be Biden doesn't get reelected, because you got to start a war to get reelected, right? If you don't start some war, you probably can't get reelected in either party. I don't think it matters which party you're in. It works great for both. So that's kind of look like the minimum if nothing really happens. 2, they could, destroy 90% of the surface of the Earth. It's like, and what's going to happen in between those two? I don't know, but that is the game that we're talking about here. It's somewhere on that spectrum, if you will.
That's
not a very lighthearted end.
No, but I again, this is, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I feel more comfortable relying on Putin's sanity to not do that than I do relying on the sanity of Western leaders to not do that. Like, he's an evil guy. He's got an agenda. He's a nationalist. He's a little bit of a dictator. I don't think he wants to destroy the Earth. And I think a lot of the Western leaders are more nihilistic. They have less of a long-term vision. They're more reactionary, and they're more likely to do, like, we're almost relying on him to be the one who's like, all right, I'm going to be aggressive and I'm going to do bad things, but I'm not going to go that far.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I hope. Yeah, Putin's there. He's on the button. Oh, no. And Biden's
like button. Yeah.
Oops, did I just? It'll be like, the Cuban Missile
I thought I was
crisis.
ordering another. Oops. Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be a newscast. He says, "Oopsie, sorry about that."
I thought that was the call on Earth button.
That was I want another ice cream, please. Now there are some controls on that. So there's probably somebody making sure he doesn't eat too much ice cream. And there's also somebody making sure and saying, like, at least say, "Are you sure?" when he says to launch nuclear missiles at Moscow, say. Yeah. But it is concerning, lighthearted as we sound. It's concerning that these are guys that are rattling sabers that can essentially push a button. It's not quite a button, but they can push a button and destroy Moscow or DC. Like, these guys have that power. So, the converted to self-defense, like, if you're in a situation, like, the number one thing you want to try to do is de-escalate, right?
Yeah.
Back away and de-escalate. Don't pull your weapon if you don't have to. If you can talk your way out of it, talk your way out of it. And these guys aren't doing that. It's you picture them, 2 guys with 6 shooters going, hey.
Yeah.
That's how I picture this, and it's not a very lighthearted end, as I said before. I don't want them to start World War III. I'll kind of end with that. And where's Fauci? And I'll end my closing
With
I nominate. That's a funny one too. That one works fine. I was going to nominate Vladimir Putin for the Nobel Prize in Medicine.
Sure, yeah, that's a better one. Yeah, nominate Vladimir Putin for the Nobel Prize.
I think
although
he
the
did
FDA,
more
I
than
heard
anyone
this
else.
morning, they're about to approve a 4th jab because we need more jabbing. It hasn't been enough. There's been a lull in jabs, so maybe Fauci will get resurrected. But I think I will second your nomination for Vladimir Putin for Nobel Prize in medicine.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Keith. Thank you all for
All
watching, and we will be back next week with Barbara Kay and someone else who I forget to talk about whatever they think we're being lied to about. So we'll see you for then, and I'll see you on Wednesday for Dangerous Thoughts. I don't know what else is going on this week. Beverly can tell me in chat if it's important and I need to say something about it. But otherwise, have a good day, and we will see you guys later. До свидания. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you're new to Unsafe Space, check out our deep content library that includes discussions with everyone from James Lindsay to Brett Weinstein. And please consider helping to fund our work by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on a variety of social media platforms, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space Discord server, which is open to financial supporters at any level. We hope to see you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production may corrupt previous psychological programming. If you encounter any of the following individuals, please administer government-issued neurotoxin immediately. I'm not sure what the neurotoxin will do because I am not a biologist. CRT is a complex legal theory that is needed to combat the epidemic of racist babies. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.